I hope she wins. And she brings change, right? That's what we're after, change?
Yeah, change.
We need change. All right. We're going to do the test fast as we go. So the very beginning, I have studied and in short. So circle that and make a prediction about what the poem is going to be about just based off of the title. By the way, off that last name, Slyne, can anybody guess where he's from? Where? Germany? No. In that direction, though. On that side of the Atlantic.
Denmark.
Ireland.
Is that where you were playing Irish music?
It wasn't Irish music. That was the Wonder stuff.
It sounded like Irish music.
Yeah, they went through an Irish period. They were into Irish music. They're a rock band that got into Gaelic music, and so they did a record of a bunch of islands and stuff. Yeah. No, I was just playing it because it's one of those bands that I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this before, but there's like a band that you'll hear or a song that you'll hear, and you remember exactly where you were the first time you heard it. Anyway, so we circled the title, I have studied and in short. So what maybe can we predict about the poem based off of that title?
Mistakes he made.
So maybe there's mistakes that he's made? Yeah. Maybe he's made mistakes.
Did it take long to gain the knowledge you wanted?
Oh, so it took some time to gain some knowledge that you wanted? Yeah. How long does it take to study?
Depends.
Right? Some
It takes me 5 minutes before the test.
5 minutes before the test. If you're doing it properly, how long does it take to study?
Like a day.
Yeah, a while. Yeah, it takes a while. So there's an irony in the title itself. I have studied. His studying takes time. So I have studied and in short. Okay. So I'll read through it once, and then we'll go back and we'll analyze it. I have studied and in short. I have studied. And in short, I've discovered some divinity in things. How an insect proudly makes its home on the underside of a glass table, and how grass burns green in the shade. How my faceless and fatigued father set out ahead of me, and how a stomach is commanded by the soul to be sour or pleased. I've discovered lucid dreams that war in the subconscious, and how, at times, suffering can seem like the only real thing. And I've learned it's good to fetch and grip the world in a loose fist, then pass into death without dying. Because it's a very small step from here to there. And while we mark it with busied and bruised feet that rattle all along the way, I've also discovered that life can be good. It can be good. Because what is common is cheap. And of all the infinite that could have been, we are instead. Wandering through the piazza or slogging up the gray cement stairwell, entertaining a myriad of wonders from the sharp edge of the infinite. So, any guesses what's going on here overall? Questions? Yeah.
Or if you study life.
Are we studying life? Yeah.
He's summarizing all the things he learned about the world,
Exactly.
his experiences.
Very good. So he's summarizing all of he's talking about the things that he has studied, which are through his experiences, all the things that he's experienced about the world, and he comes to a conclusion at the end. We're going to see. So, as we begin, I have studied, and in short, I've discovered some divinity in things. What is divinity? If I say something is divine, beautiful, unique. It actually refers to something very specific. Those are all kind of descriptions of it.
Is it like unexpected?
Unexpected? You see this? To be divine means to be godly, to be godlike. So if you find something in the divine, you're referring to something that's godlike. So you're saying, I've studied and in short, I've discovered some level of, I've seen some divinity in things. In other words, he has seen something in things, he's going to describe those things, that point to something divine, something godly in the universe. And then right after that, we have this little dash, and then he's going to tell us what some of those things are. How an insect proudly makes its home on the underside of a glass table. We have a bit of figurative language there. And it's one of the ones I had you circle and highlight. What is this an example of? We have an insect who's proudly making its home.
Is it personification?
Yeah, it's personification. It's a non-human thing that he has given human characteristics to. So he's discovered some divinity in things, how an insect proudly makes its home on the underside of a glass table. What kind of an insect is this, probably, by the way, if it's making its home underneath the table? It's probably a spider. Yeah. So he builds his web down there in the image. So he builds this web, and then at the end he's kind of like sitting there like, this is my home. But interestingly enough, going to imagery, where is the home, though? It's on the underside of a glass table. So maybe there's something about, maybe he's getting at something about perspective here. You know, how many of you would be very proud to live under a table? You know, probably not very many of us. But the insect can. The insect is humble. It's on the underside of a glass table. And by the way, how did the author here maybe notice the spider?
He got scared.
He got scared. But he wouldn't be scared unless he saw it.
I don't like spiders, so I don't get scared immediately.
Yeah, the table's see-through. You can look right through it. He says it's a glass table. So he's being very specific here. So we can even identify glass table as imagery, because if there's an image that he's building there. We should have a sense of what a glass table looks like. So I would certainly be circling that as I'm talking about these things and telling you the answers. Glass table is imagery. What else has he discovered? Or what else has he seen divinity in? Give you a hint, it's the very next friggin' line. Grass burns green in the shade. How the hell does grass burn green in the shade?
Super shiny.
Yeah. Yeah. You seen grass? And by the way, where is the grass the greenest?
On the other side.
On the other side. Yeah. So we have a way of looking at the grass and saying, man, that's some beautiful grass. It's shiny. It's in the shade. It's nice and cool over there. It's somehow it shouldn't grow green in the shade because that's not where the sunlight's hitting, but it does. So even though the sunlight isn't hitting this thing, he sees it as being beautiful and green and burning in the shade. And then this next line. And by the way, grass burning green in the shade, another thing of imagery there, more imagery. So you're going to get a sense there's a lot of imagery in this poem. And how my faceless and fatigued father set out ahead of me. What's a faceless and fatigued father? And how does a faceless and fatigued father set out ahead? Yeah.
His dad wasn't around.
His dad wasn't really around. But it says he set out ahead of him. So he wasn't around. So why might he not have been around? What was he doing? Working. Yeah. So it's this idea, now put that all together, how is his faceless and fatigued father setting out ahead of him? What does that mean when someone goes out ahead of you?
Looking out for you?
Yeah, they're looking out for you. They're preparing the path for you. So his father, who's faceless, he wasn't really around a lot because he was always working because he's fatigued. Also faceless, you can think of faceless there as a symbolism there, because he's pointing out that his father was just wasn't really anybody special. He was faceless. He was common. He's a common person. And his father was working, so he wasn't around very much. He was fatigued, and he goes out ahead of him. He prepares the path for him. And how a stomach is commanded by the soul to be sour or pleased. I like that one. I like that one. Anybody ever in here ever been so upset that you're not hungry? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden something goes your way, like that one thing that's going against you, you're not eating, and then all of a sudden it goes your way, and the first thing you do is you look for a large pizza. You know? The idea is that, maybe if you've ever been through heartbreak before, your soul is commanding, your stomach and your soul. So think about this. If your stomach isn't hungry, like if you go through something traumatic or you go through like a heartbreak or something, and you don't want to eat, it's a weird thing. Because is it your body telling you, don't eat? No, there's something else going on there. He refers to a soul here, indicating that there are these two separate things. We've talked about this before. You've got the body, and then you've got the soul. The soul is the thing that drives the car. The body is the car itself. You have the soul, which drives the body. And he's pointing out here that this is a demonstration of something divine. Because if your cat doesn't sit there and go like, I'm depressed, I'm not going to eat today. Your cat, even when they're sad, goes over and eats. The only time that they don't eat is when they're sick. And that's because there's something in their body that's telling them not to eat. It isn't something in their soul. So there's a significant difference between why we do these things and why animals do these things. So he's pointing out that he sees some level of divinity in all of these things. In other words, he sees all of these things as a suggestion of something divine in the universe. Something that most of us probably don't even notice. An insect that proudly makes its home. He thinks that's divine, that an insect can be proud of this thing it's made. And if the insect can be proud of it, so I guess it's a question, why can't we be proud of the things that we make, as simple as they are? You know, he points out that it's grass burns green in the shade. He sees something divine in that. He sees something divine in the fact that he has a father who worked really, really hard and prepared the way for him. And he was faceless. He didn't even get the credit for it, really. But he sees something divine in the father that has him do that. And there's something divine in the fact that the body and the soul are so completely different. That the stomach is commanded by the soul to be sour or pleased, to be hungry or not. I've discovered, he continues, I've discovered lucid dreams. Oh, what's a lucid dream? Yeah, so when you can control the dream. It's a really important point there. A lucid dream is when you're dreaming and you realize you're dreaming and you can control it. And it feels really, really real. I've discovered lucid dreams that war in the subconscious and how at times suffering can seem like the only real thing. So he's discovered lucid dreams that you can kind of control. And the idea there is that you can control any of these things. If you're in your dream, you can control whether you're, what's going on in your subconscious, what's going on in your mind, and how it is that you're going to interpret this stuff in the real world. And notice in the very next line it says how at times suffering can seem like the only real thing. Not that it is, but that you can actually convince yourself that suffering is all that there is. But he just got done telling us some very positive things that are not about suffering. So he's pointing out that you can see divinity in the humble, basic things of life, and yet you can also experience suffering. Both of those. So which one are you going to do? Well, I guess it can be a choice of which one you pursue. Lucid dreams there, probably imagery. And I've learned it's good to fetch and grip the world in the loose fist, then pass into death without dying. So this idea of a loose fist, what's he getting at here with this image of a loose, and again, it's an image of a loose fist. What's it look like when you hold on to something with a...
You're not holding on to it as tightly.
Yeah, you hold on to it because it's important. But, in other words, you hold on to this thing and... Maybe pencil would be better. You hold on to this thing and, someone, it can be taken away from you. But if you hold on to something super, super tight, I call it white knuckling because you hold on to it so tight that your knuckles turn white. If you're holding on to something super, super tightly and someone can't take that thing out, well, if you hold on to... What happens to a thing if you hold on to it too tight? It breaks. You destroy it. Eventually, this person's going to hold too hard. You're like, well, now it's no good to any of us. So he says it's good to fetch and to go out to the world and grip it in a loose fist. Hold on to your life and hold on to your ideas, but in a loose fist, so that if something better does come along, you can replace it with something else that's going to, be more permanent, more real. But you shouldn't hold on to something so tightly that you're afraid to lose it, because the moment that you're afraid to lose it, you become enslaved to that thing. If you have a bunch of money and you're afraid of losing all your money, well, now you're going to be a slave to your money, and you're going to do things that you would never do otherwise, because you're trying so hard to hold on to that. You find people all the time. I'm sure many of you know people like this who are holding on to their relationship so super tight because they can't imagine what their world is like without that, and they're going to squeeze it, and then what they end up doing is squeezing the other person, and then then of course what ends up happening is it breaks, and now you can't even dislodge that thing. Because the trauma that you suffered now is somewhere deep inside there, and how you get that thing out. So what people will instead do is they'll try to take, well, nothing gets you over the last one, like the next one, right? So you try to shove that thing out, but then they end up just jamming more trauma into that wound. And then eventually, of course, that one fails because they haven't dealt with, they still have that, that splinter inside. So then they try to jam this one out, and it's like, finally got that one out, but now you see you're still jammed up on the last one. Problem is when we hold on to things so super tight, we end up destroying them. And he even points out here that we can pass into death without dying.
Mrs. Ellen,
Yes.
this is explained in my ex.
I believe so.
That's all
They're
they
still
was.
holding on.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
they're still holding on.
no, they held on to me too tightly that it was suffocating me, and I had to end it.
Yeah.
And they're just moving on. Every month they have a new person replacing. I don't know what they're trying to run from, but.
Yeah. So they have a whole bunch of things jammed into there. And you understand that now, if you've got 4 splinters jammed in there, well, you can't pay particular attention to any one of them. And they're all still irritating you. So this is what we refer to as trauma and baggage. We'll say that people come into relationship with baggage. That's him replacing somebody with someone new every month, filling you up with just more baggage that has to be dealt with. And what ends up happening eventually is either the hand breaks or it becomes too much to put everything in there and everything falls apart in life. Yeah. And then we sit there and we're like, man, how did this happen? You know, little by little. That's how it happened. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do things become overwhelming? Well, little bit by little bit by little bit. Eventually it ends up happening. So it's more of a cautionary thing here. And he even says here, to pass into death without dying. What is it, what might he mean by this, to pass into death without dying?
You can really live.
We never really live. We get a chance to live. Yeah.
Possibly no suffering.
No suffering. Yeah. How many times do you die?
Once.
Once? If you're courageous, yeah. If you're not courageous, how many times do you die? More than once, 1,000 times. So the line from Shakespeare is probably referencing that. Heroes die, cowards die many times before their death, but the courageous tasted death but once.
Okay, you know, death is not like actual person death, a death of a person, but like a death of a situation.
Yeah, explain.
Like, for example, like our childhood, I guess you could say, like when we're young, we're childish, and then we start growing up, and we start going through experiences which like cause our child person to die.
Like all the things you just described. Yeah. The old you has to die. I referenced it earlier today, and I was saying that we put away the things of our childhood because the old self has to die in order for the new self to become. This is the war between you and your parents, you understand. They have to die. Not literally, but figuratively. I mean, literally eventually, but figuratively so. Because you can't live as long as they're alive. This is why you fight, you do battle with your parents, because you can't come into existence until you've been able to put that behind you, and then you can become yourself. And then eventually your children are going to fight with you and war with you, and they're going to have to emerge from that and be themselves. It's this constant cycle of birth, death, and renewal. So yeah, absolutely. And I've learned it's good to fish the grip, then passing death without dying, because, and then we have a comma here, so he's pausing, because he's about to explain something to us. It's a very small step from here to there. From where to where? Where's that small step? He just told us.
From life to death.
From life to death. It's a very small step from life to death. And while we mark life with busied and bruised feet that rattle all along the way. Why are our feet busied and bruised? We went through a lot, yeah. And we mark our life this way. We will reference like that time that we were in this relationship, or the time we were hurt here, or the time that we had this loss. So our feet are busy. We're always busy. We're not really reflecting. And our feet are bruised. We've been through a lot. And we're rattling all along the way with all of these things that we're carrying with us. So he's learned that it's a small step from life to death, and that we mark it with these busy and bruised feet. He's also discovered something really important that a lot of people miss. I've discovered that life can be good. It can be good. Not that it is. People oftentimes say life is good. Maybe for you. But the idea is that it can be good. Because what's common is cheap. What's common is cheap. And of all the infinite things that could have been, we are instead. You ever think about the complete impossibility of your existence? You know, it's at the risk of traumatizing you. If your parents had hooked up 20 seconds earlier or 20 seconds later, it's a good chance you wouldn't be here. There'd be something else. There'd be somebody else here. The chances of you having been born and existing, it's unbelievable. It's trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions to one. And you've already beaten those odds once before. And if that's the case, what are you worried about now? What are the chances that this business is going to work out? I don't know, 1 in 100? I don't know, man, that's pretty narrow. Dude, look at yourself someday. 1 in trillions. And you're here. You've already beaten those odds once before. And now, because, he says, what's common is cheap. So how common are you? You're the only one in the universe. People look at the universe and they go, wow, it's so big, there must be somebody else out there. Well, how about the fact that the universe is so big and who cares who else is out there? You are here right now, at this moment. And that will never be repeated again. Whatever moment that you're living in right now will never be repeated again because, well, You may have heard before that no one steps into the same river twice. Yeah. It's a different river, it's a different person. This thing that you're experiencing right now in this classroom is an experience you can never have again. So I guess the question is how best to pass that time. And it strikes me, as I've said before, it strikes me as the thing that's unspeakably sad in a life that's so short as ours. To figure out how best to maximize this interval of life that we've been given. You can't extend it. You can shorten it. Don't do that. But you can't extend it. So he says the life can be good because what's common is cheap. So just by virtue of the fact that you're here, you are divine in that sense. You are the only one of you in the universe. And that's unspeakably rare. You know? I mean, you think about how much would a diamond be worth if it was the only diamond in the universe. You know? We would cherish that thing. We would polish it. And yet so few of us cherish and polish our own lives. It's an odd thing that maybe we just don't think of it that way. But you are incredibly special by virtue of the fact that you exist. Maybe that's why we should respect people and their views as well, by the way, from earlier. And then he gives us a scene wandering through the piazza. Piazza is a really beautiful place. Imagine life is beautiful when you're wandering through the piazza and everything is beautiful and wonderful, like, oh, I feel so free. Or slogging up the gray cement stairwell. I get this image here of imagery of a person who's like walking up the stairs of their crappy apartment building because the elevator doesn't work. And this person, maybe they're carrying groceries and they're wondering, like, can life get any worse? Yeah, you could be not walking to a house, and you could not be carrying groceries. And don't ever, ever, ever ask the universe, can things get any worse? Because the answer is, yeah, exactly. Yes, things can get worse. And he has this last line here, entertaining a myriad of wonders from the sharp edge of the infinite. So entertaining all the wonders that you can imagine, all the beautiful things you could possibly imagine, but when you're doing that, you're doing it from that sharp edge between life and death. You've only got so much time, and it's not just like a thin line, it's a sharp line. What happens if you stand on a sharp line? Now you better make a decision, one or the other, because it's cutting into you. So it's short. Some of us can stand on that edge longer than others. Some of us can observe the beauty from that sharp edge. In other words, while that thing is digging into your skin and while you're suffering, the ability to still recognize this myriad of wonders, that's the ultimately divine thing in the universe. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?